Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Business Spotlight. I'm your host, Todd Rodden. I'm a certified business and executive coach based in the Dayton, Ohio area. And thrilled to have you join us. And also with our guest today, Colleen Gilardi, who's the vice president and co-owner of A&B Machine and Design based in the Sidney, Ohio area. If you're new to the Business Spotlight, we are thrilled to have you join us here. Encourage you to check out other videos we have in the series, and to all the viewers, always encourage you to hit the like and share button after this message to continue to grow our community here. So without further ado, again, I'm thrilled to have Colleen Gilardi join us. So Colleen, maybe just take a minute, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about A&B Machine and Design.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me today, Todd. So A&B Machine is a precision machine shop. We're up in Sidney, which is about 40 minutes north of Dayton a bit. So we specialize in 3, 4, and 5 axis machining, milling, lathe work. We also do some finishing processes, assembly work, fabrication, welding, things like that.
So walk us through, how did you get started in the business as an owner, co-owner?
Mm-hmm. So interesting story. So my husband is from a long line of entrepreneurs. He's one of the only people in his family that did not immediately go down the entrepreneurial route. He decided to go to college. The rest of his family went straight into work and built some pretty amazing businesses. But so he always kind of had in the back of his head that someday I'm going to start my own business, right? And so we both were kind of in the corporate world, pursuing our careers and working crazy hours, working for other people. And we have 3 boys. And when my youngest was about 4, I just kind of got tired of, not putting him to bed at night because I was coming home late from work or rushing out in the morning to a meeting and not being able to get him off to school and having the babysitter do that and everything else. So decided to stay home with the boys and raise them full time. Well, about 6 months after that, my husband came to me and said, I found it. I found the perfect company. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I want to buy this company. It's in Sydney. I'm from there. It's just perfect for us. And I said, for us? What do you mean for us? Again, I'm going to stay home and raise the kids, right? So anyway, long story short, he was right. It was a great business fit. We ended up purchasing the business, and about 4 or 5 months later, he, kind of came to me and said, I really need your help. Will you, come on board part-time, kind of be flexible, still be able to raise the kids, but, help me out with some things. So started doing that part-time and did that all the way through, raising kids, getting them through school and things like that. And then eventually ended up going back full-time with him. So that's kind of the short version of our journey. And here we are 17 years later. So still doing it.
So 17 years, so quite the journey. And that's, talk about a huge step already with, young kids and then making that big leap. So that's
yes, for sure.
A brave couple that the two of you are as well. So
we didn't really know what we were getting into, which is probably a good thing.
Yes.
Ignorance is bliss. Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe share a little bit. You talked about machining and design work. Maybe talk to a little bit around who are your target customers. So if someone's watching this, they might know, hey, A&B might be a provider for us.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And so not to be super broad in that answer, but I will be kind of broad because really there's so much that we can do, and our umbrella is pretty broad. But we always like to say any part that is basically the size of, a small matchbox car to about the size of a basketball that needs precision machining, we could make. So that's really broad. But if you think about all the different, if you start looking around your house and, when you're out in public and all the different metal and plastic parts that kind of fit within that realm, we could make that. So really it's a kind of a big oyster for us, we like to say.
Okay. But any certain industries?
Yeah, we're pretty heavily involved in the firearms right now. We do some food, a little bit of automotive. We do a little bit of aerospace, material handling. So again, really no industry that we won't get into, because again, those parts are they're everywhere, right? Yeah. And so those are kind of the industries that we historically have specialized in, printing, things like that.
Yeah, almost any manufacturer needs machine parts in some
Correct.
way, shape, or form. So yeah,
Exactly.
great market to be in. So
Yep.
so what do you think separates A&B from other providers out there? What makes you unique?
Yeah. So, I think if I'm a buyer, right, if I can put on my buyer's hat for a minute, I mean, there's three things that our buyers always want. They want, quality, price, and on-time delivery. Okay. And so, but those are the things that really they want from everybody. And those are sort of the baseline of what everybody should be offering from machining services. But what we always like to say is we go above and beyond that. We do a lot of reverse engineering with customers. They'll send us a print and we'll kind of say to them, hey, have you ever thought about doing it this way? Because if we can manufacture it that way, it might be a little bit cheaper, bring your cost down. Or have you ever thought about a different material? Again, all with the interest of pricing and cost involved in all of that. The other thing we hear a lot from our customers is that some of the machine shops that they do business with, they don't always get great communication. They'll send prints over and they'll get the quote and then they'll start the job. And then there's not a lot of communication as far as the status of the job, delivery times, things like that. So we always find it's really important to build that relationship with the customer. And I always, we always say internally to our employees, bad information or negative information, let's say something is going to be behind schedule or whatever, it's better to communicate that to the customer than no communication at all.
Oh yeah.
So, even if you
That's
feel
right.
like, oh my gosh, it might not be great news that we have to deliver, the fact that we're communicating and kind of keeping the customer informed and letting them manage their business appropriately based on where we are in the project is really important. So I think those are some of the things that we hear from our customers that set us apart and why customers continue to come back to us.
Okay. Yeah, so critical how you handle that bad news, right?
Exactly.
And that you're upfront with it, right?
Right.
Really,
Yeah.
strengthen the relationship or just completely deteriorate it.
Right. And everybody's going to have that. I mean, it's just part of business, but to your point, it's how you deal with it.
Yeah. Right.
And how
So
transparent you are and things like that.
for sure. So 17 years in, I'm sure it's seen a lot of changes in that. What have you found to be the keys to growing the business? Particularly kind of your marketing strategies that seem to bear the most fruit.
We for us, the biggest thing is LinkedIn, and I'm sure that's pretty common for most people. Being a small business, we have a small marketing budget, and so every penny that we spend on marketing has to be done very precisely. But it's funny, we started using LinkedIn a lot more heavily, probably about 2 years ago. And, we would everywhere we would go to family parties or we would go to dinner downtown or wherever. And inevitably people would come up to us and say, boy, your LinkedIn presence is great. We see what you're doing. And, social media marketing is interesting because you put it out there and yes, it's trackable and you can get some data and things like that. But you never really know for sure how well it's doing. But when you hear stuff like that come back to you, you know that it's being seen and you know that it's effective.
Okay. So how you've been able to measure that effectiveness then of LinkedIn?
Again, we do get some stats, but I mean, again, I'll just say it's more word of mouth, right? I mean, it's people saying things to you that they're seeing it. It's we do some email marketing that's tied to our social media marketing. And so we can kind of trace things back that way as far as where they are in the process. And so sometimes we know where a customer is coming, from us, at what stage in that process they've jumped in, how many times they've looked at us versus opened emails and things like that, versus how many times have they actually responded. So we're definitely getting a little more sophisticated in our process.
So seeing how those different communication channels kind of play together, right? The
Correct.
email kind of promotes them to go check you out on LinkedIn, right? Which kind of
Correct.
continues to build the engagement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we call it a series. It's a series of communication pinpoints, basically. And so, it's really kind of fascinating to see. It's like a study in human behavior, right? At what point does that potential customer decide to jump in, and at what point do they decide, hey, you're just not for me or whatever. But it's interesting.
So 17 years in, after making that giant leap into the business,
Mm-hmm.
what's been the biggest roadblock or two that you've had to overcome, and what did you learn? through that?
Well, so again, we bought the business in 2007, and in 2008, we had the recession, right? So it was like, again, my husband says, let's buy this business. And then the next year it's like, what have we done? And of course we went through COVID, and that was challenging. But going back to the 2007 and 8 episode, we actually got really lucky. We picked up one of our, in the history of our company, one of our biggest customers at that point. That was before, there was definitely social media, and there was some target advertising that was starting to happen, but the sophistication just wasn't there. So this customer went to, I think, Google, and they did a search on machine shops in Ohio. Well, back then, before you were really buying for, premium spots at the top and buying sponsorships and things like that, luckily we're A and B.
And D.
And so by default, we kind of came to the top. So anyway, we ended up getting this great customer that way. So that was really kind of, that was just really a blessing that kind of fell into our lap. So that's really how we kind of got over that hurdle. With COVID, that was obviously a huge challenge for everybody. I will say the funding that everybody was given, I mean, that was very grateful for that. We probably wouldn't still be here today without some of that. And then of course, just getting creative on how you go about your business, how you can cut your basic things, how you can cut your expenses, how you can maximize your employees, getting creative on your quoting. And again, that kind of goes back to, how we can work with our customers to kind of tailor and give them, custom solutions that work for them, and just being there basically when they need you.
So now we're, 3-ish years post-COVID now. What have been the couple learnings, changes you've made through that now you still rely on day in, day out?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the biggest things for us coming out of COVID that it really kind of shook our tree was it forced us to look at our company culture, right? Because coming out of COVID, and I know a lot of people share these pains, it was a different workforce, right? And so trying to recruit people, first of all, just trying to find the bodies at that time was tough. Getting the bodies to show up to work was tough. Getting them to come back day 2 and 3 was tough. I mean, it was just, I think human resources was probably the biggest challenge at that point. So what we did is we stepped back and we took a look at our culture, and we said, okay, where have we historically been and where do we want to be? And where we want to be is probably different than what we would have thought 2 years ago, right? Because the landscape had really changed. And so we just started doing things, some things that might be kind of basic, but stuff we'd never done before, like employee surveys, customer surveys, what's important to our employees, what kind of things do they want to see in benefits, what kinds of things do they want to see in their work environment, what do they expect from their peers? I mean, just all that stuff. So, what does it take for an employee to want to come to work for us every day and keep coming back and make it a career, right? Not just stay with us for 6 months or for a year or 2 years, but, in the long term. So that's really, I'll say, one of the biggest things that we changed that I think will be the biggest sticking point for us long term.
So a lot to unpack there, and really, really key, especially in this continued tight, labor market here. So
right.
As you went through that process of really learning more about your culture, right? What were the things that were a surprise to you? Something different than what you thought going into it. You hit on things like you started doing surveys, you started looking at benefits, the work environment. Was there something that was, it was different than what I expected they would tell us?
Yeah. Yeah, really little, well, I don't want to say little because they weren't little to the employee, but things that I think we maybe take for granted as a business owner. Little things like, I want to get along with the guy next to me or the gal next to me, or, I don't want there to be a tense environment, or I want some recognition, when it's my birthday, or if my wife is sick, I want you to recognize that. Or, and the best way I can boil that down is really just the human element. Right. I mean, all of our employees are, they're mothers and fathers and husbands and wives and grandparents and children before they're employees. Right. So they have this whole life outside of us before they even, present themselves to us every day. So it sounds basic, but it's really just remembering who they are as people before they are as employees. And I think we've always done a really good job of that. Again, we're a small family business. You know, our kids have worked in the business, so we take a lot of pride in that family business aspect and treating people kind of like family. But it was good to hear that from our employees. It kind of reinforced where we needed to continue to put our efforts.
Okay, great. Great learnings. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So now we take that lens. We've been looking back. Now as we look forward, right? What's the current challenge that you see out in front of you that you're trying to solve for?
Yeah. You know, I'll say the labor market, I think, is getting better. It's easier for us to get people, and people are staying longer, so that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say the biggest challenge that we always find is just getting people to know about us, right? It's the marketing stuff. It's awareness. It's building your reputation out there, continuing to build your reputation. You know, if 25 new customers landed in my lap today, it'd be great, right? It's like, it's Christmas, you know? So, and again, you know, we do some marketing, but because, you know, we're smaller and we have smaller budgets and things like that, it's harder to make those budgets stretch as far. So I would say that's probably, we're anticipating a growth mode in the next 3 to 5 years. And so that's going to be key to us is, you know, how are we going to get people to understand who we are and what we do and why we're different? So I would say the marketing aspect.
Okay. You already hit on this a little bit around team, right? The importance and the learnings coming out of COVID and some ways you pivoted there, but maybe take a minute, kind of describe your team, right? And then other keys you found to leading your team.
Yeah, again, I'll go back to, you know, the human element, leading by example. I mean, these all sound like cliches, but they're so true. I mean, you know, this is one of the things, again, I think we have a benefit of being a small business because we're right there next to our people working, whether it's on the floor or in the office. So we can have those conversations with them, you know, address things on the fly, try to not let them hang, you know, long term. There's a quote and I'm not going to get it right, but it's something about, you know, let bad behavior continue and the good behavior will stop, like that kind of concept, right?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of being firm, fair, and consistent, right? We have policies that we try to hold our people accountable to, but we understand again that they are humans and that they do have things outside of work. Sometimes we need to make exceptions, not that we're bending the rules for one person and not the other, but we try to be fair, right? We try to be realistic and fair, and also make it clear that we expect that in return from them too. So it's kind of a give and take relationship.
Are there any particular types of skills or experiences you're looking to add to the team now? In case somebody's watching. Yeah.
Good question. Not immediately. We just hired a new person for, who's kind of our admin, HR, customer service. So that'll be a big role. We've got a salesperson that we hired about a year ago. We'll probably be looking to add quality in the next year. We're always looking for different ways to get some help with things like, you know, quoting and buying. Right now, that kind of falls under my husband's umbrella. He wears like 85 hats. And I wear about 75. So, you know, but so little things like that can kind of help clear his plate a little bit so that we can continue to, you know, build strategies and things like that long term, kind of get out of the weeds a little bit.
Okay, good. Yeah, always at that struggle, right? To get out of the day-to-day to work on the business.
Exactly. Yeah.
So as you shift that there, you going forward, what's your dream for the business? If you look down the road 3 to 5 years, what do you see on the horizon?
I mean, our goal is to triple it. I would say within 10 years. At that point, you know, hopefully my husband and I will be looking at retirement. Although that doesn't seem like we're ever going to retire, right? I mean, I don't know what we would do if we did retire because we've done this for so long, but yeah, so, you know, that's kind of the big picture. And then along those lines, it's sort of how we grow is almost as important as how much we grow, right? And what I mean by that is, you know, things like, as we grow, how can we contribute to the community, right? How can our employees get more involved in community volunteering? How can we give back? How can they give back? You know, things like that. So kind of a holistic approach.
I love that. How we
Yeah.
grow is as important as how much
Right.
we grow, right? It's easy
You know,
to see
because
it.
again, if and when we retire someday, this will be our legacy. And so, it's when people talk about A&B Machine, when we bought it, it had a great legacy. It had a great reputation from both the customers and the employees and in the community. And so when it comes time for us to eventually exit, we want to leave that same footprint. And that has everything to do with, again, not just, how big we are or how many customers we have, but what do the employees think of us? What do their families think of us? Did we provide good livelihoods for our employees and their families and things like that?
Okay.
Yeah.
I would think, especially, Sydney is a smaller community,
Mhm.
right? That especially resonates there as well. Not that it
Absolutely.
doesn't matter in a big city, but especially in a small
Right. Sure.
rural community. Right?
Very much so.
Okay. So, we've got a lot of business owners who watch this. Some, many of which are probably newer in their journey, right? Maybe a couple of years in their entrepreneurial journey. So, what have you found to be the keys to success?
Keys to success and kind of advice I would give a new business owner would be, first of all, strap in, you're going for a ride, right? It's gonna be an exciting one. It's gonna be a roller coaster. You have to have thick skin. You have to have resiliency. You have to be able, and also you have to know your why, right? And so if you know your why, then when times get tough, or when markets fluctuate and things like that, or things like COVID, or the economy, or things like that are out of your control, when those things happen, if you know your why, you're always going to be very clear on how to move forward and why you're moving forward. And again, you have to have thick skin to be able to get through those times. So that's what I would the advice I would give.
And maybe you shared this though. So, what do you view as your why? You and your husband.
Again, it's thinking, down the road, and in hindsight, what do we want our legacy to be? So, whether, somebody buys it or one of our kids buys, whatever, we don't really know what that picture will look like, but, what will the legacy of A&B Machine be? We want it to be the situation where maybe it's a small family like us that purchases it and gets to have a great livelihood and continue to have it grow in the community and things like that. It's our employees, it's knowing a little bit about, again, their extended family, knowing about their husbands and wives and their kids and their grandkids and what makes them people. And, we sign a paycheck every week, and that paycheck goes to their livelihood, right? And so everything that we do kind of at the end of the day goes towards that goal. Without our employees and without that motivation, what are we doing, So
I'm curious, how, as an owner and leader, how do you continue to kind of sharpen your skills? Is there certain books that stand out, or is there somebody you follow, podcasts, besides the Business Spotlight, of course?
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like I'm always reading like 3 or 4 different books at a time. I'll start one and it's like, oh, this is great. And I'm all about self-help books and personal development books. And so I'll start one. Right now I'm reading The Hidden Leader by Gifford Thomas. And so, I've got that going. And then another friend gave me Dave Ramsey's latest book. And so then I was like, I can't wait till I'm done with this one. I'm going to read this one at the same time. And my new favorite though is Blinkist. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's it's kind of like the Cliff Notes of books, of audiobooks. So it'll take one book and it will condense it down to like 20 minutes, and you can listen to it. And so those are great, if I'm on the treadmill or if I'm walking or whatever, you feel like you read the book, even though you kind of cheated and you didn't read the whole thing, but you get the gist of it. And there's a lot of great information you can pull out of that. So I'm constantly listening to those, lots of podcasts, things like that.
Okay. Yeah, likewise. And it sounds like similar. There might be a stack of books on your nightstand that is on your to-do list as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
So as we get close to wrapping up here, what are the best ways for folks to stay connected, to learn more with A&B?
Sure. So visit us at www.A&B Machine. So it's kind of a mouthful. It's the letter A, the word and, the letter B, machine.com. Can also, reach out to us via email, RFQS, which is, RFQs at A&B Machine. We're all over social media. LinkedIn is a great place. Learn about kind of our employees, our culture, different products that we have. We try to exhibit there. So I would say those are probably the top 3 ways.
Okay, well, great. Encourage folks to reach out and continue to follow them on their journey to 3x in the next 10 years, right? But also giving back and serving the community in the same process. So
yeah, well, thanks for having me on today.
Yeah. Oh, one final question though.
Okay.
All right. What inspires you today?
It's a good question. There's a lot of talk right now about the trades and how, schools aren't really prepping kids and there's a big shortage, looking at the next generation and things like that. And while I do see that, and I think it is a very real concern, I also look at some of the stuff that organizations like the DRMA, Dayton Regional Manufacturing Association, and some of the tech schools are doing along those lines. Things like creating internship programs and apprenticeship programs for this next generation to kind of get them involved in manufacturing and into the trades. There's a lot of stuff going on at the state level with tech cred and things like that that's really helping businesses and students, to increase their learning and their skill level, which is a win-win for both. So I look at a lot of that stuff, and yes, we have a ways to go, but I think the tools are out there. There's a lot of great things happening. So those are kind of the things that excite me and keep me motivated.
Okay. Yeah, great. It is inspiring to see that, those programs, those systems in place to, not only encourage younger folks to go into the trades and pursue manufacturing, which for far too long, it's kind of been pointing them the other directions. Right. And it's good to see that. And it's good for the country as well. So.
Yeah, which is funny because, my husband and I came from a very traditional, 4-year degree type of thing. And we went down that traditional road. And, now 17 years later, it's like, you just realize there's so many other avenues for these kids. And manufacturing is just a great career, and so just, educating the younger generation on what makes it so good.
All right. Well, Colleen, thank you for sharing your story, your journey, also for sharing more about A&B. We're thrilled to have you. Lots of great learnings and takeaways for our viewers here today. And again, to our viewers, we thank you for joining us. Again, we encourage you to go out and like and share what you saw here today, and that allows us to continue to expand the community as part of our Business Spotlight series. So, and thank you, Colleen, and to all our viewers. I hope you all have a spectacular day. Thank you.